I was born to be a wanderer. I was shaped to the earth like a seabird to a wave. Some birds fly until they die. I have made a promise to myself. My last descent won't be the tumbling, helpless kind, but a sharp gannet plunge, a dive with intent, aimed at something deep in the sea. I don't regret anything, but I will if I let myself. I can think only about the plain, the wind, and the shore so far away where land begins again. The weather is improving. We fix the leak as best we can. I will go soon. I hate the never-ending day. The sun circles me like a vulture. I want a respite of stars. Hey everybody, welcome back to Zimm Reads. Welcome to this year's Booker Prize long list reading reviews. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for clicking on my video, navigating to my channel, caring at all what I have to say or what my thoughts are about Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. Sitting in front of a camera and attempting to be oneself in front of a presumed audience is challenging for me, and I think for a lot of people. It's one thing to get in front of a camera and just spew or ramble or hide behind the masks that we so often use to hide ourselves because of how much we hate ourselves or how little we know ourselves. Today, I really want to slow down and really try to be myself with you without any fear that I'm boring you, without any fear that I'm scaring you away or drying you out like an unbasted turkey. I just want to sit with you and share how this book made me feel and some pre-processed or processed on the fly thoughts that I have about this book, and do my best to be myself with you. So I'm going to pour a little bit of Redbreast 12, my favorite whiskey, into this cup, this whiskey glass, I should say. This is a single pot still whiskey aged 12 years in Middleton, Ireland, and it is something really special. There's notes of crushed red apple. There is biscuit and chocolate, a little bit of fresh grass on the nose, and then just a sweet, smooth, delicious spirit. And what better way to open the Booker season 2021 than with a toast to the authors and readers of these distinguished pieces of literature in a time when stories are more important than ever and community is rare to find. May these books bring us together, and may they inspire us to be more truly ourselves and more human. So, if you've got a glass, raise it with me. Even if you feel stupid, come on. You out there with the glass sitting next to your comp. Or if you're on your phone, raise your phone. I don't care. To Booker. Thank you, Booker, for continuing this time-honored tradition of awarding books with money and readership and accolades. But let's talk about Great Circle, longlisted Booker Prize 2021. My first read off of the list of 13 novels, the Booker's dozen, not the Baker's dozen. We're not making bagels here. The Booker's dozen, 13 books this year. I'm going to come out of the gate. I'm just going to tell you guys, my viewers, the people viewing this, the people listening to this, I really enjoyed reading this book. I'm going to try to process my thoughts with you. I'm going to try to tell you why. I'm going to try to tell you what I think about it. I'm going to try to get stuff that's in here onto my tongue and into your ears. This is 600 pages. It's the longest book on the list. I'm so happy I started with this book. The first thing I want to say, I had a visceral joy reading this book. What I mean by that is underneath the current of my intellect and my mental infrastructure, I wanted to just keep going. I just wanted to keep reading the story. And I honestly think it's going to be on the short list, which gets announced September 14th. So if you want to wait to read it, I think you're safe to do so because I think it's going to be on the short list. This book to me was special, but let's talk a little about the synopsis or the summary or the plot line, whatever you want to call it. Let's talk about it. It's a lot. There's 600 pages. How do I distill this? No pun intended. How do I distill this down to something that dignifies the book for what it is? We are following two stories. One is more modern, present era in the 2010s, and one is in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1914 onward. And the 1914 onward is really, I think, the meat of the story. The modern day serves to support this great circle concept, in my opinion. The 1914 story onward, the story in the past, is a story of a fictional female pilot by the name of Marion Graves. Marion Graves is the main thread through the story. Because the modern day dynamic, the modern day narrative, which is written in first person, whereas the past scenes with Marion Graves are not, is of an actress, a modern day actress, who is named Hadley something. She's being cast to play Marion Graves in her movie. So we're seeing the movie and Hadley's experiences and perceptions of Marion and everything play out in the modern day, and then we're watching the narrative, the actual narrative of Marion and her life and the characters that kind of orbit around her through her journey. And we follow the journey literally from babyhood, as it's called, infancy of Marion Graves and her twin brother Jamie Graves, on to their life as children in Missoula, Montana, being raised by their uncle, Wallace, and into many things that occur in Montana, and then in subsequent places, on into World War II, where Marion begins flying planes, delivering newly built planes to male pilots on the front lines, or at least to places where they're going to take off and go to the front lines, or the front airlines or airfields. I don't know. What do they call it? If you're a pilot, are you going to the front lines? Because you're not really at the lines. Is it the front clouds? Maybe it's the front clouds. The pilots that were heading to the front clouds. Not to be confused with the back clouds. Or the sound clouds. So that's what Marion does in the war. Now, we follow her story. And then after World War II, we discover, and we know this right in the beginning of the book, that Marion Graves is attempting at some point in her life to circumnavigate the globe longitudinally or latitudinally. I don't know. Pole to pole. Really New Zealand to all the way around back to New Zealand, but the longitudinal way. Would this be longitudinal? I think latitude is this way, but she's like following longitudinal. It's the longitudinal great circle, whereas the equator is the latitudinal great circle of the Earth, our home planet. and Jeff Bezos' motherland. Spoiler alert, but not really, because in page 1 or on the back or in Synopsis online, you will discover that Marion... actually, I'm not going to even say it. I'm not even going to say it, because I don't know how to say it without giving something away. I've already spent a lot of minutes on the synopsis, so I'm going to stop on the synopsis. What I want to talk about is what I think Maggie Shipstead does well, and what I think about the book in general. I think that what Maggie Shipstead did for me, she continually impressed me. Maggie Shipstead maintains a solid narrative and a solid storyline and solid character development, and probably most impressive is solid character voice. I was so impressed by the way Maggie Shipstead crafted these characters, shaped them, formed them, gave them their voices, gave them their personalities, without force-feeding us their details about them to make them more believable or to make them more true to her image of them. She masterfully offers us characters that are so vivid and distinct. The characters have distinct, believable voices, histories, ambitions, apathies, love, loss, grief, pining. I mean, she does such a masterful job maintaining voice for her characters. It was beautiful to see. I mean, over and over and over again, I the word that kept surfacing for me was, what an achievement. If you read this, if you approach this to let it be what it is, not to demand it to be something that it's not to tie it to a chair and beat a confession out of it, or want it to be existential or philosophical or something other than a narrative and a plot line. If you approach it with that kind of dignity and dignify it to be what it is, first and foremost as a novel, but a novel that has already been determined to be distinguished and worthy of at least longlisting for the Booker. If you can approach it in that way, and don't come in with preconceptions, I think that you will find something so special. I think what you will see is the achievement that it is. That is, in my opinion, undeniable for the open-minded reader, for the one that's willing to embrace this for what it is, which is a plotline heavy narrative story. But Maggie Shipstead does such a good job of allowing Hadley, who's the main character in the first-person narrative in those modern time chapters, to have a consistent, believable voice. To where even if I didn't like her at times or relate to her at times, I knew she was real. I could believe her without having to suspend anything. She was real. She was human. She was complicated. That's an achievement. So, that's my first point about the book, is it's an achievement. I had a visceral experience reading the book. I wanted to keep going. Thematically, what is Maggie Shipstead exploring? What we see in the story is Marion. We're getting firsthand the true account of Marion Graves' story. But then we're seeing in the future Hadley, a part of the narrative for the movie and creating the movie, and you begin to see the inconsistencies, the things that the movie thinks are true that are not, because they don't have enough information. But we're seeing the real story, and so it's really interesting to see to watch how Maggie Shipstead gives us that inconsistent, incompatible narratives about one individual. The golden thread through the story, Marion Graves. We're getting the real story, and then there was a book written by Marion Graves from her journals, and then Carol Pfeiffer, another character in the story, later wrote a book off of Marion's book. And then there's a movie being made not off of Marion's journals or anything that exists, artifacts of her life. The movie's being made off of Carol Pfeiffer's book. So we're seeing this distortion as the timeline continues for Marion Graves, even after her death. We have her real story, then her own words about her life, and then some person that was related in some way that wrote a book off of her book, and now a movie being made off of that book. And watching that distortion is interesting. It is compelling to consider that who we are, how we live, what we accomplish and achieve, what we become, what we pass down, what we say, what we think, what we feel, the things that are hidden and secret, those experiences are momentary and immediately begin this process of becoming distorted. And we even play a part in that process of distortion. It makes you consider and wonder what matters and what's real. There's a lot of things that distort reality. That's such an interesting dynamic that Maggie Shipstead offers to us beautifully. In my opinion, beautifully. If you approach this with open eyes and a humble perspective, you can see how much research Maggie Shipstead had to do to fill these pages. How much research she had to do on aviation, how much research she had to do on flying, how much she had to understand about even the history of different aviators and significant points in aviation history, the war, World War II, and the role that aviation played in the war. All of that, there's so much research, but she offers it to us effortlessly. You feel it's true. You feel it is representing history honestly. And you feel like Marion Graves, this fictitious character, is actually a part of history, which is maybe another point on distortion, that reality can be distorted even through fiction. It's getting deep, guys. Anyways, it's hard for me to encapsulate completely and distill down how everything I think about this book, everything I think about this story. What I do know is that stories are important, but I think it's more than that. I think that it is not just a story. I think that there's humanity in it. And to me, that's the purpose of art, is for the artist to honestly comment on humanity, or honestly capture humanity. And I think Maggie Shipstead in this novel accomplished that. I haven't read her other two novels before this, but I think that there is so much humanity in these pages and so much in the story of Marion Graves. I was moved and drawn. I've always had a fascination with Amelia Earhart, and the story of her being lost and no one knowing what happened, and any new evidence that surfaces, true or not, how compelling it is. And this hit all those bones. Female historical aviation. The reality is this: Great Circle, I do believe, will be on the short list. I haven't read any of the other books. I'm really glad to have started with this book, because to have started with a book that was less compelling, less delicious, less moving, would have been would have deflated my sales. It would have been hard to move on. I started with something wonderful. I started with something great. And I'm glad I did. I don't know that it'll win. Last year's winner, Shuggy Bane, was a narrative, a plot line, a traditional kind of story. And this is as well. But maybe it will. But go read it. If you've read it, throw your comments down in the comment section. I'd love to dialogue with you. Go read Great Circle. And also, guys, if you're in front of your computer all day long or on your phone all day long, just like put it down and get outside, or put it down and breathe a little bit. Like, step away from the ones and zeros. Thanks for watching.